ओम अज्ञानातिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यभूमिष्ठं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददान्ति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिन् इति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So in today's Japa talk, I thought of taking some reference from Bhagavatam Mitra 11 to last time the story what I had told. So one of the important when I was hearing Prabhupada's lecture, one of the important instructions from the Bhagavatam he was giving was the instructions what Lord Rishabhadev gave to his. So when just excuse me. One minute, I'm sorry, there was it. So I was saying the instructions given by Rishabhadev in the 5th chapter of Bhagavatam. So this was the very important instruction given by Rishabhadev to his son when he was actually leaving the kingdom to his sons, and then they living from his material opulences. So Rishabhadev told his sons that, oh my sons, as a father, it is very important to give instructions. That's the Vedic principle. So Rishabhadev, as a genuine father, he was giving instructions, very important instructions to his sons, and that instruction was he was telling that that the importance of this human form of body. There are several beings, that living beings that take birth in this material world, but of all that material bodies, this human birth has got a lot of value. So don't make use of this human life for only sense gratification, just like the hawks and dogs. So why Prabhupada says why in the Vedic principles the examples of hawks are particularly taken. So if you see the life of the hawks, you can see that the hawks are actually, which lives in villages, which lives in the drains outside, they work very hard. And why are they working very hard? They are working very hard to find some stools out there in the material world. And when they find stools, what they do, they eat that stools, and after they eat that stools, they become very fatty. So the moment they become very fatty, their next step is actually towards the urge of sex. So then they go and they don't have any differentiation, especially the hawks and dogs, they don't have any differentiation with respect to having sex. So their urge for sex actually continues, and they work very hard for this tool. And by this tool, they become very fat, and then they actually satisfy their senses. So that is why the Vedas actually takes the examples of dogs and hawks. So we as a human being, our aim is actually not to enjoy sense gratification. But Rishabdev says that as a human being, our real purpose is actually to engage in austerity and penance. That means to engage in the service of the Lord. So by doing austerity and penances, one actually purifies his heart. So the moment one actually purifies his heart, he can engage in the service of the heart wholeheartedly, and then he can actually attain the liberations. So what do you mean by attaining liberation? So I was just reading this introduction part of Chaitanya, Lord teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and there was a very nice thing given about Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Lord actually comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for us, particularly to show us how to actually live as a devotee. So in the starting part, like Prabhupada explains, what is Chaitanya? So Chaitanya means living force. So living force means prana shakti. Chaitanya का मतलब क्या है? Chaitanya का मतलब है prana shakti. That means living force. And what is charita? Charita means character. So character. and Amrita means immortality. So Prabhupada says that this living force, the character of this living force is actually immortal. The living force means, and what is living force? First, Prabhupada explains what is living force. Living force means which can, something which can do activity, and something which can, there is a movement. You cannot jad vastu ko hum living force nahi kar sakte. Like for example, the chair I am sitting, the table we are sitting, it does not have any living force. It's just only a jada. It's only a material. These things. It does not have any living force onto it. But we, the human being, we have a living force within us. And then so that is why that is the difference between the jada vastu and the living force. So Lord in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the meaning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said it is the character of the living force. So Lord himself comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is actually exhibiting the characteristic, what should be the characteristics of a living force in order to attain immortality. See, as a living force, we are actually present in this material world. So why are we not able to exhibit the immortality? Then we may ask. So why we are not able to express the character of immortality is because even though we are this living force and we are actually our constitutional position is actually to engage in activities. Our constitutional position is to actually to show the characteristics of immortality. But for any human being or for any creature in this material world, they are not able to exhibit this characteristics of immortality. Why? Because they are actually in the shackles of this material body, and material body cannot actually express immortality. That is why being in the this living force being covered by this material body is not able to express this living force. And then Prabhupada says that this living force, there are two types of living force. This prana shakti, there are two types of prana shaktis. And what are that prana shaktis? So one living force is actually we, the soul, and there is another prana shakti, that is God. So that is actually super soul. So the difference, then what is the difference between these two prana shaktis? See, God is one who actually doesn't fall down, who doesn't have the tendency to fall down. But we, the living force, the living force as the jivas, our tendency is always to fall down. So whenever we perform activities, our tendency is actually to fall down. But God, whatever activities he does, he actually is, in fact, one of his energy is Maya. So he actually will never fall down. So that is the difference between the God and the Jiva. That is the, otherwise both have the same characteristics. But Lord actually doesn't fall down under Maya or illusion. But this Jiva actually falls down. So Prabhupada very nicely gives an analogy for this, explaining us why this Jiva Shakti only falls down, why the Lord doesn't doesn't fall. So he says, in one of the analogy, he gives the examples of these clouds. See, when we see from the bottom, we see from the down, we see the clouds actually being covered in the sky. But when we go in a flight, or when we go above these clouds, then we see actually a clear sky, and above the sky we can see the sun. So from the sun point of view, when we see this material world, we look very, very tiny. So similarly for the Lord, these jivas are very, very minute particles. So this, all the jivas that here present are actually very, very minute particles. So we were also in that position. But our tendency is actually, because of our tendency to fall down, we have actually come here into this material world, and then we are performing, because of our activities we have fallen down, and then we are seeing here the activities in the association of Maya. Because of our illusion, we are fallen down, and we are actually suffering here in this material world. So that is why actually Lord actually comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and actually teaches us that what should be the characteristics of a living force, so that he can become immortal. So, but sometimes this Mayavadi says that when Lord comes here, Lord also is actually in Maya or illusion. So this is a very, very long perspective. And Prabhupada very nicely explains this with one more analogy. So he says that how God is actually not in Maya when he actually comes here into this material world. So he gives the example of a teacher. So when a teacher sees a poor student who is actually not able to write, properly, then what does the teacher do? He takes the chalk and then in the board he start writing A, B, C, and he starts to explain the student that this is how you actually have to write. So then when by seeing the teacher should not think that okay, the teacher doesn't know how to write, so he's actually learning. No, he is not learning, but in fact he's trying to teach the students how to actually learn from it. So similarly, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is nothing but Krishna himself. So most of the time we may not have heard about the names of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, especially in South India. So when we say that Lord Krishna appeared in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just 500 years back, like people, they become like, it's very difficult for them to understand that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. But when we see the books of the Acharyas, through their explanations, we can clearly understand why actually Lord actually comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we are very, very fortunate that the very merciful incarnations of the Lord has come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to teach us the characteristics of the living force so that we can become immortal. So to teach us the activities, how one should perform the activities in such a way that we can actually get liberated from this material world. Otherwise, what happens? We become actually entangled in this material world, and then we will be suffering, trying to actually enjoy the sense gratification, trying to satisfy our material needs. We will be actually suffering in this Maya. Either we can actually, by performing devotional service, either we can take the shelter of Krishna by following his example as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He has come here, shown us how to actually what kind of activities one should perform, and then how to actually do the austerities and penances and actually get liberated from the clutches of Maya. If we don't do that, then we are actually in the clutches of Maya, and then Maya will actually start kicking us. And Prabhupada gives the example of this ass. Just like a female ass actually starts kicking the male ass when actually it comes for urge of sense gratification. Similarly, we in this material world, when we are actually trying to taste this material taste, it's like Prabhupada says, it's like feeding the ghee into the fire. This fire is like the material sense enjoyment. So any small ghee that you add to this fire, it will actually only increase. So similarly, our propensity to enjoy this material world is like a ghee. It will actually only increase and increase and increase. It cannot decrease. But when we take the shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his teachings, his instructions, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, by chanting the holy names of the Lord, we actually become purified in our, when we actually chant in this holy names of the Lord from our mouth, this sound actually gets into our ears, and then from ears it goes into our heart, and then this heart becomes purified. So when this heart becomes purified, then we can actually try to be free from these three modes of material nature. And then when we engage in the service of the Lord, then actually we become qualified to actually become immortal. So we should know this qualification of being immortal is our actually indent nature. But only because we are in this material world, in this material body, we are not able to exhibit this. And Rishabhadev very nicely gives these instructions to his sons, and he says, he very nicely gives this instruction. Just I will read it for you. So Krishna, Lord Rishabhadev told his sons, my dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material body in this world, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for dogs and hogs that eat stool. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified, and when one attains this position, he attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. That is what I said as immortality. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has very mercifully taught us how to actually develop these characteristics so that we can become immortal. So I'll stop here in the interest of time. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. It's very meditative actually when you speaking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu uh, and and his gift to all humankind. So, so and it is the science of living people. Chaitanya Charitamrita.